Phil Collins built his career behind the drums. For 50 years, those hands created magic. But in 2024, something devastating happened. The 74-year-old legend can no longer hold drumsticks. His latest health update shocked the music world. It started during a routine checkup. Doctors found something they didn't expect. Now, the man who gave us In the Air Tonight sits in silence. His hands shake uncontrollably. The nerve damage is worse than anyone knew. What the doctors discovered will break your heart. Phil Collins was born on January 30, 1951 in Putney Hospital in southwest London. The city still carried the scars of World War II. Bombed streets were being rebuilt and rationing would not fully end until 1954. So his family lived in a steady mix of hope and hardship. His father, Grierville, had survived the war as a paratrooper. His mother, June, first worked in a toy shop and later became a theatrical agent for kids. Their small Wandsworth home always felt busy, always felt creative, even when money was tight. Phil was the youngest of three. Clive loved drawing and would grow up to become a cartoonist. Carol dreamed of ice skating. Phil was the one who could not sit still. At age 5, he began tapping rhythms on biscuit tins, turning the kitchen into his own tiny studio. Every sound in the house became a drum, every beat felt like the start of something he could not yet name. His early school years were filled with this restless spark. At Nelson Primary School, he was the kid who always wanted to perform. The kid who made noise in every class. The kid teachers struggled to contain. When he moved to Chesapeake County Grammar School, he formed his first band, The Real Thing, and even brought in his future wife, Andrea Bertarelli, as a backup singer. They played basic garage rock using a cheap drum kit his family had saved to buy. At the same time, he played football, rehearsed band songs, and watched his mother bring home stories from theatrical auditions at the Barbara Speakey Stage School. June even sent him to small modeling jobs. And by age 10, he was posing for fashion magazines. His father, who worked as an insurance agent, tried to keep the household calm, but the pull of the performing world kept growing stronger around Phil. Then came the moment that changed everything. At 14, he shocked his family and friends by leaving regular school altogether. Instead of A-levels and the usual path toward university, he enrolled full-time at the Barbara Speakey Stage School. It was a risky move for any kid in the 1960s. Everyone knew show business could collapse without warning. Still, he wanted it. He had already tasted applause. In 1963, he won a talent show at a holiday camp by performing Elvis covers on drums. He had been teased for loving music more than formal education, but he could not go back. Giving up school meant cutting off all backup plans and walking straight into uncertainty. The leap was frightening, but it was also the first real choice he made for himself. Not long after, he found himself around one of the biggest storms in music history. At just 13, he was one of roughly 350 extras hired for the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night. The shoot at the Scola Theatre on March 31, 1964 was so loud that he could barely hear himself think. He did not get paid. He did not get a speaking role. His shots were cut because he was not screaming excited enough. But he had stood in the center of Beatlemania, surrounded by a wall of sound and flashing lights. It was a tiny moment, yet it stayed with him. That same year, he stepped into the West End as the Artful Dodger in Oliver. From 1964 to 1965, he performed 8 shows a week at the New Theatre, earning £15 a week and working harder than most adults. His voice broke while he was still on stage, forcing him to speak instead of sing. But he refused to quit. The long nights, the fast costume changes, the pressure of stepping into the brightest spotlight in London, all pushed him further. He was learning discipline long before he ever joined a rock band. He also acted in Cadbury ads and appeared in the 1967 children's film Calamity the Cow. He played the young collector, spent long days outdoors wrangling animals, argued with directors, and learned how cruel older actors could be to a kid. He hated the process. He felt trapped in the same cheeky troublemaker roles. By his late teens, he had taken more than 20 acting parts, but he felt no joy in them anymore. His audition for the musical Fanny Hill in 1968 was the final blow. He failed to get the role and something inside him clicked. Enough. He wanted out of acting for good. At 12, he had already played drums with the Carl Denver Trio in smoky clubs where adults treated him like cheap labor. They often paid him nothing. They made him stay late into the night when he should have been home asleep. It was his first lesson in how unfair the music business could be. But he also felt something stronger than frustration. He felt freedom when he played. Real freedom that acting never gave him. By 1967, he joined Hickory Wind and began earning $5 a night, which would be around $90 today. The pubs were smoky, the pay was low, but the music mattered. He met Andrea Bertorelli through the band and fell quietly in love. They recorded their first single, Green Light and the Key, in a simple CBS session that same year. The rooms were cramped, the equipment basic, but for Phil, it felt like stepping into his future. Then came Flaming Youth. In 1968, he and guitarist Ronnie Carroll formed the band, and together they recorded the concept album Arc 2. Inspired by the 1969 moon landing, the album told the story of Earth being evacuated into space. It was bold, strange, and far ahead of its time. Reviews were kind, sales were a disaster. Only about 150 copies sold. The band fell apart soon after. It hurt, but it also pushed him toward the next door. In 1969, he auditioned for Blind Faith, the new supergroup with Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood. He was 18 and sure this was his moment. They told him he was too young. He walked away crushed. Later that year, he played on early sessions for George Harrison's All Things Must Pass, only to discover that his parts for Art of Dying never made it into the final release. Years later, Harrison even sent him a prank tape of the session. Phil took the joke well, but the disappointment stuck. By 1975, he was experimenting with jazz fusion in the band Brand X. They improvised wild complex rhythms and spent nights at clubs like the Roxy, where in 1979 he took part in a 3-night 6-set marathon. Some of it was captured on rare tapes that fans still hunt for. The music was never meant for charts. It stretched him in new ways and sharpened his craft. He almost lost everything once in 1969 when a faulty electrical setup set the Hickory Wind stage on fire. Smoke poured through the club. People panicked. Phil kept drumming until the last possible moment because the rhythm felt like the only solid thing in the room. They evacuated just in time. Promoters grew wary of booking them afterward, but Phil walked away with a deeper sense of who he was. Someone who would keep going even when the world felt like it was burning. By 1970, the same year he married Andrea Bertorelli at 19 after a rushed elopement. He adopted her daughter Joey Lee and tried to build a stable life while still scraping by. The marriage would fall apart by 1980, but at the time it felt like another bold leap. He had been leaping his whole life anyway. From biscuit tins to West End lights, from failed auditions to cosmic rock albums that sold 150 copies. Raced it quickly. Then came Invisible Touch in 1986. It became the band's best-selling album ever. More than 21 million copies sold worldwide, including 6 million in the US. The title track hit #1 in the US. Collins directed the surreal video, which cost about $500,000 to make, enormous for the time. The world tour covered 121 dates across North America, Europe, and Japan, earning tens of millions and sending Genesis into stadium-level fame. In July 1987, they played 4 sold-out nights at Wembley Stadium. More than 288,000 tickets were sold. The shows became one of the decade's biggest live events, and the recordings sold more than 4 million copies. Collins admitted the puppet visuals and Land of Confusion strained his voice, but the scale of those nights pushed the band into rock history. During that era, he also worked with Eric Clapton on the 1986 album August. He produced and drummed while hiding a growing numbness in his hands from spinal wear caused by years of drumming. He performed through pain without letting fans know, holding everything together even as his body resisted. By 1987, the backlash arrived. He was everywhere on radio and MTV. Songs like Susio and In the Air Tonight played non-stop. Critics called him the most annoying pop star of the decade. Collins joked he heard his songs more on radio than he played them himself. Even with the criticism, he won 3 Grammys in 1987. That his success made him a target, something he recognized and learned to live with. Then came the We Can't Dance tour in 1991. It featured hydraulic drum risers lifting his kit high into the air during solos. The tour covered more than 100 shows across 3 continents. It looked spectacular, but the strain came back. During rehearsals for No Son of Mine, his voice cracked after more than 100 shows. The pressure of being both frontman and drummer pushed him to the edge again. The tour cemented Genesis as stadium giants, but it also carried the shadow of his health struggles that would later force him to step back. Phil Collins stepped into his solo career carrying a heart full of pain and a mind full of ideas. And somehow that mix turned into a wave of music that no one could ignore. His first album, Face Value, came out on February 13, 1981, and it felt like someone had opened the door to everything he had been hiding. He recorded most of it at home in Shalford in Surrey, staring at his little 8-track machine with a Prophet 5 nearby and a Roland CR78 guiding the rhythm. He was going through a brutal divorce and every emotion slipped into the songs without him trying to hide it. In the Air Tonight came out of that storm in one take with no reverb, no edits, and no conguing. The drum break that crashes in the middle was born from that same anger and became one of the most famous moments in 1980s music. He pulled in the Phoenix horns for fire and El Shankar for a strange beautiful edge. And somehow that mix of tears and invention created an album that sold more than 25 million copies and set the tone for the decade. A year later, he came back with another burst of raw feeling. Hello, I Must Be Going arrived on November 5, 1982, and he sounded sharper and angrier than before. One song held all that fury, I Didn't Care Anymore. A heavy, bitter track made even harder because he taped drumsticks to his hands to push through early nerve pain. The album felt smaller and closer because he kept the team tight. Mostly John Giblin on bass and Daryl Stumer on guitar while Collins handled most of the rest himself. It worked. The song hit the charts and fans felt the honesty in every line. It showed that he could take pain and turn it into something powerful without losing control of the feeling underneath. Then came the moment when everything lifted. No Jacket Required landed on February 18, 1985, and the whole world started paying attention. He filled the album with songs that stuck to you one more night. Studio, Take Me Home. And he brought in players who gave the music a clean, bright edge. Leland Clark shaped the low end while David Frank built the groove that carried Sustio. The album sat on top of the Billboard charts for 7 weeks and 5 weeks in the UK, pulled in 3 Grammys, including Album of the Year in 1986, went 12 times platinum in the US, and sold more than 25 million copies around the world. That same year, he stood at Live Aid and played in London, then raced onto the Concorde and played again in Philadelphia for more than 1 billion people watching. It became one of the wildest charity stunts in music and pushed him into a level of fame he had never imagined. His success stretched past albums into movies. In 1984, he wrote Against All Odds for a film of the same name. He had written it in one night, carrying the weight of lost love from both the movie and his own life. The song hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 3 weeks and earned him an Academy Award nomination along with a Grammy. During the film work, he even argued with director Taylor Hackford to make sure the song lived at the center of the story and won that fight. The song became one of the defining heartbreak anthems of the decade. By the mid-1980s, he was everywhere. Live Aid in 1985 turned into the biggest physical test of his life. He played in London, sprinted to the Concorde and flew to Philadelphia to drum for a Led Zeppelin reunion. The lack of rest and the stress pushed his nerves to the limit, and he later said the drumming that night felt like the hardest he had ever done. The performances were watched by about 1.9 billion people around the world and cemented his place as a global figure who would push himself even when his body begged for a break. Then in 1989 he poured his attention into something different but seriously came out with Another Day in Paradise, leading the way, a song about homelessness that hit #1 in 16 countries. David Crosby joined him on the track and the message reached radios everywhere. The song won a Grammy even as lawsuits tried to pull it apart, accusing him of borrowing melodies from